my friends. Today I'd like to make a brief video about John Mark. And I'd like to give my theory as to who he was and sort of what his mission was if he was an intelligence operative. Because I disagree completely with the theory that has been given by certain prominent figures in the alt-right. And that theory is that John Mark was out to collect data from his audience, that he was a honeypot out to collect data from his audience. And there's two reasons why I disagree and want to talk against this theory. The first is that intelligence agencies already have all the data they could possibly want about you. The real honeypots are your cell phone, your internet history. They could even trace your phone calls, listen to your phone calls. So if you're a person of interest to the military intelligence, they probably already have a full psychological profile of you. They probably have all the data they could possibly want about you. And it's a very elaborate scheme to create a YouTube channel, have it exist for a year, just to get you to sign a document at a rally, or get you to sign up for some kind of institute where they get your name and phone number or email address. That's stuff that they already have about you. And a real honeypot operation, I think, usually results in people either having some serious blackmail on them, giving up some serious compromising information, or having the people engage in an illegal activity wherein they're trapped in that process. They're led to engage in some kind of illegal activity where they can actually get arrested for it. So just giving up some banal data, like your email address and your real name, that's I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. And the other reason why I disagree with this idea is that I think it really misdirects people into thinking that if there were feds operating within the scene of the dissident right, then they're just trying to capture your data. They're just trying to get information about you. But I think where intelligence operatives would really shine, or glow, I should say, where their work would count the most would be in psychological operations. It would be if there were any intelligence operatives working within the dissident right scene, they would be influencers, thought leaders, so to speak, people who manipulate and control how people think. It would be in the psychological operations. So people who are trying to portray federal agents as just, these data collectors, I think it misdirects from where we should really be looking, which are thought leaders. And I think John Mark is the same. I think if John Mark was some kind of operative, he would have been engaging in a psychological operation. And I think that would have been a demoralization campaign. Because I'm kind of assuming you know who John Mark is by talking about all this, but essentially John Mark was a guy who came onto the scene, suddenly gained tens of thousands of subscribers, and was promoting a message of civil war, of armed insurrection, of engaging in illegal activities to disrupt infrastructure, things of that nature. And he was even working with a guy called Kurt Doolittle, who admitted to being hired by the federal government to engage in this kind of destabilization campaign in foreign countries. So he's advocating for civil war, armed insurrection, armed resistance to the government. And then, after about a year of doing this, he suddenly decides to disavow this entire message, to go back against it and say, actually, I was wrong about this whole thing. We need this long-term system building type of strategy. Armed revolution isn't going to work. And he basically disavows his entire message, goes back against his entire message. So if that was anything, if that sort of a trick was anything, it was, in my opinion, a demoralization campaign. It was demoralizing to the sorts of people out there who are actually prepared to engage in some kind of armed resistance against the federal government. There are those kinds of people out there, I'm sure. And if you were the type of person who was prepared to engage in some kind of civil war, some kind of armed rebellion against this tyrannical, increasingly totalitarian state, oligarchy-controlled state, and you were following John Mark as some kind of leader, then suddenly having this leader abandon you and tell you that his message was wrong and that he was wrong and we shouldn't be doing that, that would be, I think, demoralizing to the type of person who was prepared to fight the tyrannical, totalitarian state that we're living under. And if you were an agent of the state, that type of demoralizing effect is rather advantageous to you. If you can just demoralize the people who are prepared to fight against you, it makes it a lot easier to defend yourself and to secure your power. And I'm sure that there are people out there who were demoralized by this. Every day, I think that people are becoming more and more demoralized about the idea that it would ever be possible to fight against this tyrannical state. And so a John Mark kind of operation plays into that perfectly. So that, I think, is the real purpose of someone like John Mark. That would be the real thing. You establish someone as a leader, get people to see him as a leader against the state, a leader of people who are prepared to fight the state, and then suddenly you abandon that and say that you were wrong the whole time. That, I think, would be, if I were running military intelligence and I wanted to demoralize the opposition, that's the sort of thing that I would want to set up. So people who are out there saying, once again, people who are out there saying he was just trying to collect data, it was some kind of honeypot, they're misdirecting from the fact that more sophisticated psychological operations are happening in the dissident right scene. And those more sophisticated operations are the ones that we should be wary about. And yeah, if you look into history, there are examples of quote-unquote honeypots where people are led into committing illegal activity or are led into giving up information that blackmails them And that, I think, is really deserving of the name honeypot. Even though when I looked up honeypot, it seems like the technical meaning of that term is to get someone to fall in love with like a female spy or something, and then get them compromised through that sort of a means. But there's a more general meaning to it, which is getting people to involve themselves in some kind of illegal activity and then trapping them in the midst of that illegal activity. And I wanted to give a couple of examples just to give some history too, because I love bringing up history and historical examples of things. And one of those would be in the early 1800s. There was a great deal of social unrest in Britain because of the Industrial Revolution. Workers, artisans, craftsmen were being replaced by industry, basically, by automation. And a lot of people were very upset about that. And they were prepared to engage in some kind of insurrection. It wasn't just the Luddites. It was a widespread social movement. And there were these clubs that were created called the Hampton Clubs, which were created, by the way, by an ex-naval officer, which right away makes those clubs suspect. And in one particular instance, the Pentrick Hampton Club. Pentrick was a place in England. The Pentrick Hampton Club had a group of angry young men that were prepared to storm Parliament and demand some kind of reform. And these angry young men had within their group a long-term government spy named William Oliver, who was present and I think connected with the the leadership of the Hampton Club there. And William Oliver convinced this angry group of dissidents that an army was coming from the north of more angry dissidents, of tens of thousands of angry dissidents. This army was coming from the north, and they were prepared to go and really storm Parliament, I think, and really demand this change. And so, learning this false information given to them by a government spy, it filled these young men with the confidence to actually go out and start engaging in sort of an insurrection. And the fact is that there was no army coming to reinforce them. And these young men were then led into a trap where the police were waiting with open arms to receive them instead of a group of their fellow dissidents. And they were all caught, and the leaders of this insurrection, genuine rebel leaders, were hanged. Many more were arrested. And that, I think, is how a genuine operation that deserves the name honeypot, how that goes. It doesn't end with people just signing a document and giving their name and phone number and email address. So once again, that's all information that the government already has on you. Another example from that same time period was the Cato Street Conspiracy. And the Cato Street Conspiracy was very similar. A government spy was operating among a group of genuine rebels, genuine dissidents, and these people had as their object the murder, the assassination of top government ministers. And the Home Office spy, the Home Office was basically the MI6 or the CIA of the day. This Home Office spy told the group of dissidents that the ministers would be meeting at this particular time, and they were planning it out when they could sort of ambush these ministers and assassinate them, at the same time as giving this information to the Home Office. So the government spy led these dissidents to the meeting house that they all believed was going to house the ministers that they were targeting. But instead of ministers being there, there was a group, once again, of law enforcement agents waiting to receive the dissidents with open arms. And once again, I think a couple of the leaders were hanged and the rest were thrown in prison. So that is the type of thing that I think deserves the name honeypot. It's these sorts of operations have been happening for a very long time. But I'll just repeat for the last time, that sort of thing is useful when there are genuine dissidents that are ready to engage in revolutionary activity. And if John Mark actually did lead people into a situation where they were about to commit illegal actions and then people were arrested, that would be a honeypot. But to just collect data, it's so banal, it's so boring, and quite frankly silly, because they already have so much information about you that they don't need to have this whole sophisticated YouTube channel and false personality actor that they're putting out there to get people to come and give them their name and number and whatever. That is misdirection, because we need to be looking at the most prominent, the most important type of intelligence operation going on today, which is the PSYOP, the controlled opposition, the thought leaders, the influencers who are in many ways psychologically shaping their audience and not doing silly things like just collecting data, but actually having a psychological and an ideological effect on dissidents. So, anyway, I've rambled enough about this. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.